I'm going to pull this up, give you a little less, Caleb, a little more of the depth chart. Okay, so there are 30 oars on that depth chart. 30 oars. So Josh Heupel this time last year was misleading us a bit. I don't have any question about that when it comes to Cooper Mays' injury. He wasn't going to be ready for the opener, and they knew pretty early in the process that he might not be ready for Florida, despite what was said. I got no problem with that. That's gamesmanship. Here's why I don't have a problem with all the oars, and I'm curious if you do. I don't have a problem with all the oars because, to me, it falls in line with Josh Heupel's culture, and he wants to reward players with the potential that they may start, even though he knows deep down they won't. And I can tell you through talking to people over the weekend, the players didn't know who was actually going to be on the starting lineup. So there are a lot of them that have an oar next to them that they really don't know if they're going to run out there first against Chattanooga. Now, I would think by today or tomorrow that they would surely know. What did you think in general of the oars? And then we're going to talk about some conclusions that we can draw from that.
So some of the positions you bring up, I'm with you. I don't have a problem with. I don't have a problem having, for instance, on defense, on the line, at the 2 defensive tackle spots, he's got 2 oars for each. So 3 potential starters on each. And the 1 defensive end spot, he's got 4. If you know Rodney Garner, they want to rotate that many guys anyway. So it doesn't really matter if you're the 2nd string or the 3rd string. You're probably going to get onto the field. Is that fair to say, Dave? Because they're going to play.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take I don't think there's any problem with the defensive tackles. I think there's going to be true competition there for who plays at the end of the game, which is really who matters. We should call them the enders, not the starters. And I think so. I've got no problem with any of the defensive tackles being listed as oars. I think it's actually a really good sign that Tennessee has that many players that they think can play. I don't think that's a fib at all.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, I know James Pierce is the biggest star, but at Leo, I don't have a problem throwing in Joshua Joseph or Jordan Ross with them. I'm telling you guys, Jordan Ross has a more raw talent, has more raw physical talent than James Pierce does. I mean, he'll be better, but he has more raw physical talent. And you guys heard it here first. Now, Caleb Herring being on there, I'm not a fan of, but that's more gamesmanship. Receivers, he's got an oar for all 3 spots. I don't really know if that's a big problem. It may fuel your idea that they're going to rotate those out anyway. On the left side of the offensive line, at both tackle spots, he's got oars, and at left guard. I think at the tackle spots, that's when he might actually rotate a guard. He may just not have a guy. And then at tight end, he's got 3 oars. Well, that's because he does rotate tight ends. And so some of these spots I don't really mind because I do think Josh Heupel does a lot of rotating on both sides of the ball, given his tempo. He wants to play a lot of guys anyway. Is that fair to say? So he doesn't want people to think that they're not a starter or they're not. Basically, he doesn't want to give off the vibe of just because you don't play the first series doesn't mean you're going to play, so you should always be ready to go. I think that's what a lot of this is about.
As for the receivers, I think that he's being honest. I think that guys like Chaz Nimrod and Dante Thornton have demanded playing time. Now, you're not going to see a rotation during a drive, right? We can all agree with that. But I do believe that Tennessee can rotate from drive to drive and stay fresher. I also believe part of this is to keep guys healthy and engaged because it's a longer season and they expect to make a run in the playoffs. I'll draw that conclusion too. I think they're going to play more people because they can, but also because they want to, and they have to if they're going to be healthy at the end of the season.
I think there's a lot of value to that, but I think what's revealing is who they didn't list as potential starters, particularly at receiver.
I agree. So let's go there.
So and I wrote this, and yeah, you guys can see it online right now. They listed Brew McCoy, Squirrel White, and Dante Thornton and Chris Brazel all as potential starters. No surprise there. You brought up Chaz Nimrod. But they also mentioned Caleb Webb. Now, again, Caleb Webb showed some promise last year at times, but they did not mention Mike Matthews. So it is revealing, Dave, that you would have all these Oars potential starters everywhere, but not your 5-star generational receiver being one of them. Now, before you say, oh, he's a freshman, they're just leaving out freshmen because Braylon Staley wasn't listed either. They got Boo Carter listed as a potential starter on the other side.
Yeah,
so
but who's listed higher?
Christian Harrison.
Okay, why wouldn't you do it in alphabetical order?
That's true.
I think all three of those are instances you just gave if he doesn't want to give a freshman too much love.
Okay.
He highlighted to me, the first thing I think is who's on top. That sounds weird.
Hookers always think about that.
Yeah, and Harrison's on top. So, and I'm like, well, that's not. Wouldn't you do it alphabetically if it's truly even?
Yeah, but why wouldn't you highlight then? Like, why would you highlight Peyton Lewis? Now, yes, he's a freshman, so you have him 5th, all the way down in 5th. But why are you highlighting him, but not highlighting Mike Matthews?
Okay, well, because I think that I don't think it's any indictment against Matthews. I think they're deeper at receiver as far as guys they feel good about. And I think it's as simple as being a real depth chart in that particular situation. I don't think they think Matthews is going to have an impact early in the season. But on the flip side, I think they think that Peyton Lewis, who you're high on, could have an impact earlier rather than later.
Okay. I'm with you with Peyton Lewis. And also that may be why they're highlighting Jordan Ross. But I think Mike Matthews is in that scenario. Dave, let's call it what it is. Caleb Webb's highlighted. Mike Matthews is not. So you got to bet a mortgage payment. Who has more yards by the end of the year, Caleb Webb or Mike Matthews?
I think it's a coin flip because I think there's so many people ahead of them. I mean, I hate to take I think at the end of the year, we'll say Matthews is really good because he'll make a couple of plays. He'll be allowed to play in 4 games with the new red shirt rule, and he can play against Chattanooga if he wants to. I mean, he can play anywhere along the line. So I think we'll say he's very good. But, Caleb, I don't necessarily think that he will have a bigger impact on Webb because of the people ahead of them. I don't think either of them. I mean, do either of them account for 250 yards in receiving this year?
I think Mike Matthews will. I've told you I think Mike Matthews is generational.
Okay, I'd be stunned if either one of those had 250 yards.
Even if it's just in garbage time.
Okay, I would still be stunned if either one has 250 yards. Oh, I've been wrong a lot. But we'll see. What else stood out to you about the depth chart? Because mine was the Boo Carter thing and the freshman. That's one of the things that stood out to me.
Yeah, the thing that stood out to me in the secondary is as hyped up as Heupel is in the secondary. Y'all see what I did there. But as hyped up as he is, I think they're real concerned about that about safety. They got Andre Turntine and Jacoby Thomas competing for one spot, and they got Will Brooks and Christian Charles competing for the other. I feel like that's where they plan to have Jordan Thomas, and I think they're really worried about that spot. Christian Harrison and Boo Carter competing at star. I think they're fine. I don't think they're worried at all about cornerback, by the way. Jermod McCoy, Jordan Matthews, Ricky Gibson III, Jalen McMurray, all listed as potential starters. I believe them on that. And I don't think they are worried at all about who starts in those spots. And I don't think they're worried at star.
I think Tennessee is fortunate that Jordan Thomas was hurt early because their plan, as I was told when camp opened, was that Boo Carter would be the strong safety. Okay. And I think Jordan Thomas getting hurt earlier, you immediately slide him to star and then you find a strong safety. I don't think it's a coincidence that Andre Turrentine visited with the media on Monday. So that's one of the oars that I feel is not in the water.
The weird oar to me is Andre Turrentine or Jacoby Thomas. I feel like it's a chance that both of them would start over Will Brooks or Christian Charles, don't you?
I think they're still undecided on a couple of these new guys. And let's face it, Will Brooks has paid his dues. If this were a real depth chart, you wouldn't want him listed as like 3rd string, would you? I mean,
no.
I get that. I get all this. It just to me was it's gamesmanship. I don't really have a problem with it. Do you?
I do in some places. I do at place kicker. I'm sorry. Are you employing gamesmanship at place kicker, or do you have a starter or not? You don't have co-starters at place kicker. You have a starter. Is it Max Gilbert or Josh Turbeville? Can you please tell us?
Well, it's Max Gilbert.
Okay, but that's fair. But then list that.
Right. And to me, that's a case where Turbeville is an older player. So if somebody passed him, then what does that mean? Does he transfer? Does he do whatever? So I think that's a sensitive topic, and that's why they were bracketed.
Okay, I'm not trying to be insensitive to that at all, or anything like that. But here's my point. You can, even if it's a sensitive topic, you're going to have to run somebody out there on the field on Saturday. So you can't ease that in at all. You know what I mean? Even if it is Max Gilbert, it doesn't matter what you put in the depth chart. You're running Max Gilbert out on Saturday.
No, I agree. Somebody's got to kick the ball off. They can't both run out there.
Yes, exactly.
And make one guy do coverage. So that's very fair. The show.
And I'm not trying to be insensitive, because I think I would be sensitive, but I don't think it's possible to be sensitive in that situation. What do you pat the other guy on the back to say, you're okay, you're not kicking, but you're okay. I'm going to have this guy kick right now.
You're the or.
Yeah.
You're the or. Any other ors that you had a problem with?
Not as many. I will say one thing that actually stood out, Dave, is something you talked about. Did you notice that they have a William Satterwhite or Vyson Lang as the backup center, but they had Satterwhite on top of Lang, funny enough, which does stand out.
To me, that was a glaring one. I was curious if you'd bring that up. Vyson Lang is quickly finding himself, I believe, in a transfer type position if he doesn't come along pretty quickly. And that's not saying that he should leave, not saying that I've heard that he will leave, but of at least having to weigh a decision, Caleb, when it comes to playing time versus what it means to play at the University of Tennessee. I've had questions about Vyson Lang for quite some time, and that kind of confirmed it.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And I think there was a lot of pressure on wanting him to work out as the backup center, and it just hasn't yet. And that's kind of a standout issue on its own. So Vyson Lang is kind of a problem. Now with left guard, we've talked about the issues there. Andre Kerrigan, Jackson Lampley. Dave, where do you at any point, if it's really close, get sentimental and say, Jackson Lampley's just been with the program for a long time. Maybe give him a shot.
Never.
But what if it's that close?
Oh, if it's that close, because there are 50-50s in football starting lineups.
Yeah. I mean, what if it's 50-50? Do you ever go with the guy that's he's paid his dues for so? Do you go with the Rudy who's paid his dues?
No, I'm a hard A. I would go with the guy who's more talented, who's going to be with me for the next 2 years.
Okay.
Wouldn't you?
I think it depends on the situation. I do think it kind of depends on the situation. It's sometimes the senior can be a little more valuable if they're just a little bit better. Even if they're not as good, they can bring a little bit more. Look, I'll give you an example. 2000, Cedric Wilson. Dante Stallworth was a better receiver than Cedric Wilson. He was. But Cedric Wilson was your go-to receiver because he had been with the program for a while, right?
Yes.